Hey everybody, welcome back to Fix the Rust Bucket. As you can see, this front right corner of the truck is torn down again. In some other videos, you saw everything was being put back on. That was to check and line up everything in the front end from basically the radiator support back to the firewall. Everything in there was lined up, looking good. Took that all back off to expose where we have to do the work on the A-pillar. Now, the original thought was, because we didn't know how far the damage went in until we took all this trim off and everything, there was a possibility of having to replace the A-pillar up to the roof line or past that. After disassembling everything, taking it apart and looking at it, this here was never damaged during the accident. And actually the damage is only down probably about the lower hinge down. The post, the A-pillar was never pushed backwards. It's still lined up straight this way. It was only pushed in on there. So minimal damage done, but it's a lot of work to get it fixed. Now, in order to put a new or used pillar, good pillar back on here, it reattaches to the rockers down here, your outer and inner rocker. And as you saw in earlier videos, the rockers are rusted out. So there's no way to weld that post back onto here. So we're gonna have to replace the inner and outer rockers first. So we're gonna get started with that. I'll go over the parts. I'll show you some of the tools that we're gonna be using on this. See how it goes. All right, so here's just some of the tools that we're going to be using to do this repair. You can see we just got a drill, a couple drill bits, pry bars, cutoff wheel, air chisel, got a grinder right here. Right now the grinding wheel's on there, and then a flap disc. That's just to sand down spots when we go back to weld it on. So here we are, ready to start installing all the parts. This here is the donor pillar that we got. My other video where I showed you prepping a junkyard pillar, we stripped it down to what we thought we might be using, but not too much to where we would end up damaging something we might need. Now, we're not going to need this upper part, so I didn't do any prep work up here. We did the prep work down there, but we did separate the inner and outer skins of the pillar. And so now you have here your inner skin of the pillar and your outer skin of the pillar. This part here was the inner skin of the top part of the post. Not going to need that. Off camera, got that all prepped, ready to go, sanded down all the spots that we were going to be welding, or sanded down, ready to go. As you can see here. So when we get ready to install this, all we have to do is cut it where we want our cuts to be, and then start tack welding it back onto the truck. The new parts we bought are from LMC Truck. They don't sponsor the channel or anything. That's where I got my parts from, and I'm happy with them. So here we have our inner fender, which we're going to see the whole part has to be replaced. And then this here from the same place is the outer skin for our outer rocker part. I'll post a link down below in the description to LMC Truck for the parts that I got. But for now, we're going to get the pillar out of the way, and we got to start digging into the outer skin of the rocker. Before we got into this, I did the battery. I didn't show you on this, but the battery is disconnected, separating the circuits through the truck, so when we go into welding or start welding on the truck, we don't end up popping or breaking a fuse or messing up the computer system. So to start this process, the first thing we have to do is remove the old outer rocker. It's all rusted up and garbage. To do that, we've got to find cut points and not overcut to where it's going to cause us more work or damage something that we then have to replace another part. So we're going to take the new rocker, set the new rocker in place as best you can. Now this is so rusted out on the bottom here that it's actually interfering with the bottom of this, but it's going to get us a close location of where we want to cut and start making our cuts. So for now, we'll just tap that on there, make sure it's lined up with the front where you're going to be roughly, and then to the back here with our marker, we're going to go ahead and take and mark the spot where the rocker goes. Now again, this is just a rough mark. Up front here, We can mark it, but we're not worried about it I'm not worried about it too much, because we are going to be replacing the whole post. But I do want to, when we go to replace the post, I'm going to actually match it up to the top of the rocker. I'm not going to cut the rocker itself. But so we marked the front. If you were just doing a rocker and you didn't need to do your post, same thing we did back here. Put a line, same thing up front. Put a line up front. Now with those lines in place, get this out of the way. Okay, so now you can see we have our marker line here where the rockers ends. Same thing, we have one up front here, but again, not worried about that one. That's going to get cut out. You don't want to cut above that line at all. You also, when you're getting ready to, when you're prepping this to get it to put the new one on, come down an inch, inch and a half roughly. So, you know, right about here, inch and a half. Do your first initial cut down this area. You want to leave this metal here for now, so that way when you go back to putting on the new rocker, you can fine tune that cut and get it as precise as possible to that cut. Now, we're going to leave the shelf part of the outside rocker, I guess if you call it here, the shelf part, we're going to leave that on there. We're just going to cut this out, and then we're going to cut away here. That way we can, again, fit the rocker again tight to the truck and double check this mark and see if it moves or not. Okay, so now we have all those holes drilled out and we're about ready to start putting some cuts into this panel. I want to point something out here real quick with the new panel and the old and the truck itself. Now the new panel, if you see over here, this bump coming out comes down and the rocker piece is here. The way that they press this out on a repop piece of metal, that piece right here comes out past inside the door area there and around the body panels. Now, yes, this has got a dent in it. I don't want to replace that right now. That's maybe down the road. So what we're going to end up having to do is, or I'm going to end up having to do is, I'm going to cut this piece off of the rocker, and I'll show you now when I pull this off. I'm going to cut here off of the rocker, the new rocker, and inside the door, so we don't have to mess with this outside body panel causing body work and then painting and all that. We're going to go ahead and cut right here, down here, through there, coming down to the bottom. And as you can see, this part, that's the old rocker. Here's where the body meets to the rocker, and it's just a seal right there. It's like seam sealer, and we'll just take the seam sealer off. So this will be all removed, this whole area, keeping this all still there. And eventually this will come up here. I'm going to start with my air chisel. Since there's an opening here, there's no sense in wearing down my cutoff wheel right now, when I could probably take my air chisel and just start chipping away at the metal. So we'll see how that goes. and then move on to the cutoff wheel when we need it. Okay, so here's where we're at. I took that piece off of the new rocker panel, outer rocker panel. I took that piece off that I said we were going to cut and end up reinstalling in here. That's cut off and out of the way. That gives us the room for this outer rocker to fit, and with the old rocker mostly out of the way, get a better fit and feel of how this is going to lay on the truck. So we still have, there's a little spot under the front here and a little bit on the back that's in the way, but it gets us close enough. It gets us close enough, there we go, to know where our line's going to be. And actually that first line we made is down underneath of here, which is good. This is our new mark that we won't be cutting above. It lines up here in the back. The front was a little bit higher. And the front here is still the same. It hasn't changed up front. Now I'm not worried about the front because again, we're removing the whole pillar. So with that like that, we're gonna go ahead and get this out of the way. And we're going to now continue to cut up through here, across, and pull the rest of the outer skin off, exposing the inside rocker to get to that part. So now I'm going to move on to the last part here of the outer rocker, at least, of removing it. Now you can see the inside of the A-pillar, the inside skin is dented and damaged right here. That was actually from me trying to pull on this and it didn't work, so that's how we got into replacing everything. The A-pillar on the inside is damaged now there. It's even with the hinge, and we're going to move back up to probably about this, just below this location of the clip for the trim. So I'm going to cut this completely off. I don't have to worry about the lip because that's getting removed as well down here. I'm just going to cut right across here, across the top hinge that's bent in, and then over here at the firewall, when we come out from the hinge, we're going to come up to the actual, again, this is the inner skin of the pillar. We're going to cut up to that point and stop. I'm going to drill out these spot welds that are in here. I think there's one right hidden underneath of that junk. I'm going to drill those spot welds out, but we're not going to drill so far that we punch through, completely through this skin here, or we're going to try to avoid that. I might actually just grind these off, trying to avoid damaging that, because if I get into this, one, the dashboard's still installed in this truck, and you have your heater core back just in this area, and I don't want to punch the heater core. Two, there's no access to get behind here to weld. So I'm going to have to weld the new pillar back on from the front. Okay, so let's see if we can get this torn apart. It's disconnected from everywhere. So I got 2 spot welds right here to remove. The foam. That there is pretty much the whole outer rocker removed, exposing our inner rocker. And all of this foam that we're going to have to replace. The rust doesn't start till here, and the inner rocker rolls over to where the outer rocker rolls over on top of it, and that's where it's pinched and spot welded together. But as you start getting back here, that rollover that goes down and underneath, kind of like this rollover here, but down underneath, it's gone. It's just, as you can see right here, it's rusted away. There's nowhere to weld, and I wouldn't go this far in tearing the truck apart to leave that exposed. Okay, so with the outer rocker skin removed, we can now see a little bit more of what we're going to be dealing with for the inner rocker. Here's the whole inner rocker. It runs from the back, inside of the back of the cab here, all the way up to the front of the cab. This piece right here is the inner skin of the A-pillar, and then underneath of that is your inner rocker panel attached to the body mount area that goes to the frame. Now there's 3 locations where the body mounts to the frame of the truck, and underneath of here there's one at this point here, one in the middle, and then one underneath of this corner support just back here on the rocker. Now to remove the inner rocker from them is not that big of a deal. Same thing with the spot welds. You just drill out the spot welds that are, and you can't see them right here, but they're roughly about there. You drill out the spot welds and pull the inner rocker off. The inner rocker is attached to the floor pan of the truck across the top here, all the way to the back. And then if this wasn't rusted out, where the lower or the outer rocker comes into the inner rocker here on the bottom, that's where it was attached on the bottom. Could I cut the inner rocker off roughly back in this area here, make it easy for myself? Yeah, easy is not always correct. I could cut it off, weld up the new one to the old one, but it's not going to be that difficult. It's going to be a little bit of work, but it's not difficult, and I'll show you underneath here what we've got to do. So with all the holes drilled out on the inner rocker here, and you see it's now becoming loose. That back corner was a nightmare, but it's done. We're now back up to the front. Now we have the holes drilled out here from the pillar's inner skin, but the inner rocker actually sits underneath of that, and you can see right here is the outline of the inner, where the inner rocker sits up inside there. So we are going to be replacing the pillar. We're going to have to cut, because we're just going to work on the rockers right now. We're going to have to make a cut across here above where the rocker or the inner rocker goes. Get a cut across here, remove this lower part of the inner skin, exposing the rocker, finish off any spot welds that need to be removed, and then we can pull the inner rocker off and install the new one. So on the back side here was the seam seal right here on the inside. I thought there was another spot weld here, but there wasn't, and it was the seam sealer. So we'll knock that out and get rid of that in a minute. But now that completely exposes the inner rocker, and we have to knock out these other spot welds, and then this should come off, and we can start back to reassembling. Seems pretty loose. I'm sure there's a few spot welds we didn't get the whole weld, but so we're just going to take it easy and pull this off little by little, not to damage other stuff. Going to cut this off, and then we'll deal with getting the last piece out of the back here. We've got about 8 inches, 10 inches of the rocker left. Okay, so with that last piece out of the back corner here, that completes removing the old rocker out. We're gonna have to spend time getting the few pieces of metal, this one here, out of the way. Gonna prep all the edges on the truck where the rocker is gonna go back on. And then we've got to prep the new rocker, cleaning it up to accept the welds and get it back on here. All right, so what I'm going to use to clean off this and get it prepped for the welding, including on the new inner rocker panel, is just a flap disc sander. That'll take care of any dirt, rust, and any metal burrs left from drilling these out. So with the surfaces cleaned down, the rust, any metal burrs, all that stuff is gone. Now this side I cleaned off. You want to clean this side off to lay your inner rocker back on there flush and flat, not have it sticking out in any way. We're going to be doing all the welding from the underside on the back side coming into the rocker. We're going to go ahead and hit it with some primer on the outside here. Just cover up the bare metal. And then we'll get the rocker, once that dries, we'll get the rocker installed and start welding it back in. All right, so with the primer all dried up, there's one more step we got to do before we actually can start welding this up. And that is get the new inner rocker cleaned up. And to do that, to get all of our weld points and make sure that we get it cleaned in the right spot, I'm simply just going to take this, roll it into its position, all the way to the back, bring it in, push it up inside, make sure it's flush back to where it's supposed to go here. We'll clamp it down on the front. Clamp it down the front. Now we'll go underneath and check underneath of here. Make sure it's back up against the body here in the corner, which it is. It's lined up perfect actually in the corner. So now we'll take my little silver pen here. Just gonna go underneath and we're gonna start marking out all the holes where they're at that have to be welded up. And then we'll know where we need to clean it. All right, so once we have all of those spot welds, the old spot welds marked on here, we'll just go ahead and take it back off. Down and out. And there you can see the silver marks, and some of the paint wasn't dry, but that's okay. There's all of our marks. We know where to clean, get the metal prepped to accept the weld, and a strong bond between the two. Okay, so with all the prep work done on the truck and all the prep work done on the new inner rocker, prep work being cleaned off the spots where the spot welds have to go, same thing on the inner rocker, cleaned off all the spots where the spot welds are going to go. This is a fairly large piece, and when you weld something, when you're welding stuff together, you want your ground for your welder to be as close as possible to where you're welding to get the best ground you can get. So not only on the rocker did I give myself 3 locations for grounds, I also gave myself 3 locations from front to back for grounds with the welder. When welding on thin metal like this is only 18 gauge steel. We're going to be doing spot welds, and we're really going to be only just tack welding, and moving around as we tack weld. The reason for that is to keep the heat minimal in the areas that we're going to be welding. So we have the air compressor with our air. So we'll do 1 or 2, a few tack welds, cool it off, move to a new spot, tack weld, cool it off. And we'll continue to do that until we have all of the weld points back on and the inner rocker secure. So what I'm going to do to get this back inside, said earlier, we can just roll it inside here, push it to the back corner, and then stick it up on the front. We're going to clamp it all down to weld it. Now, I'm going to push it back as far as I can, just physically. Roll it up in here. Make sure that it's secure or behind everything along the front here. I'm going to push it back as far as I can and just temporarily clamp it up here in the front. I'm going to go to the back and I'm going to secure that corner and clamp that corner in just with a few vice grips. Get that, make sure that that corner is in tight. And if that corner is in tight there, and this is lined up flush along the bottom of the floor pan, your front end will line up where it's supposed to be. So we'll go underneath, get the back corner clamped in, and then one more thing after that, after I get that clamped in, the middle here, as you can see, has a lot of play. Once the back corner we know is in the right position, I'm just going to come back and put 2 self-tapping screws in the middle here to hold it tight against the floor pan, and then we'll come back, take those out, weld the holes back up when we're done. Now under here in the corner, we're going to push up inside here, push it forwards against the floor pan and backwards, which it's already against that. It's already against the spot. So we're going to clamp it up here in the top corner, and I'm going to clamp down here because you have 2 different, you have the outside skin, body panel skin, and that inside of the body panel skin sitting there. So we're going to clamp those 2 points and then go back up top and finish off clamping this panel in. That's all you need on the top corner here. We're going to probably end up having to use 2 clamps here to hold this metal all tight. We'll weld it up in the middle and then move the clamps out of the way. That's got the panel tight against the outer skin and the bottom of this back corner panel as well. One. Still a little loose there, so we will be putting in the second one. All right, now the panel's in tight, everything's ready to go, we can start welding. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this video. That is what it takes to replace an inner rocker on a vehicle. The welds cooled off. We did go back. I didn't cover it in this video, but we did go back and sand down the weld points. We put 2 good heavy coats of primer on the inside and outside of it. Also 2 heavy coats of durable paint. Now, our next video will be finishing up the post and the outside rocker.